లిక్విడ్స్, కానీ ఇక్కడ సాలిడ్స్ అని మెన్షన్ చేసిండు. సో సాలిడ్స్ అని మెన్షన్ చేసినా కానీ ఇక్కడ ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్. సో ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ అనే ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ ఉంది. సో ఎందుకు ఇక్కడ సాలిడ్స్ అని మెన్షన్ చేసిన అంటే, సో ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ కరెంట్ ఇన్ లిక్విడ్స్ అండ్ గ్యాసెస్ ఇవి రెండిట్లలో కూడా డిఫరెన్స్ ఉంటాయి. సో దాంట్లో కూడా మీకు ఆన్సర్స్ అనేటివి వేరే వేరే వస్తాయి. సో మామూలుగా ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ కరెంట్ ఇన్ లిక్విడ్స్ అని అనుకోండి, అయాన్స్ ఉంటాయి, అయాన్స్ ద్వారా జరుగుతుంది. ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ కరెంట్ ఇన్ గ్యాసెస్ అని అంటే సో ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ ఈ అయాన్స్ కలుపుతాయి. సో ఇక్కడ ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి ఏ, ద ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ కరెంట్ ఇన్ సాలిడ్స్ ఈజ్ డ్యూ టు ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్, ద రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమన్ బాడీ ఈజ్ అరౌండ్. సో రెసిస్టెన్స్ అంటే తెలుసు మనకు, ఇట్ ఆపోజిట్స్ ద ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్. సో మన బాడీలో కూడా ఎలక్ట్రాన్ కరెంట్ వచ్చినప్పుడు దాన్ని అపోజ్ చేసే పవర్ అనేది మన బాడీకి ఉండాలి. సో దాన్నే రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమన్ బాడీ అని అంటున్నారు ఇక్కడ. సో ఎంత ఉంటుంది అంటే 1000 ఓమ్స్ అనేది రెసిస్టెన్స్ అని ఉంటుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్ ఇక్కడ డ్రాఫ్ట్ వెలాసిటీ ఆర్ డ్రిఫ్ట్ వెలాసిటీ ఆఫ్ ఎలక్ట్రాన్సిస్. సో ఇక్కడ ఎలక్ట్రాన్సిస్. సో ఇక్కడ క్వశ్చన్కి మన ఆన్సర్కి ఒకసారి చూసుకుంటే ఇక్కడ ప్రతిదాన్ని స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్తో కంపేర్ చేశారు. సో ఒకసారి ఆప్షన్ చూస్తే వెరీ స్మాల్ యాజ్ కంపేర్ టు స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్, ఈక్వల్ టు ద స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్, ఆల్మోస్ట్ ఈక్వల్ టు ద స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్, గ్రేటర్ దెన్ లైట్. సో స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్ అనేది మనకు తెలుసు, చాలా ఎంత లైట్ అంటే ఎంత చాలా ఎక్కువ స్పీడ్లోనే ఉంటుంది. సో దానికి గ్రేటర్ దెన్గా అయితే ఉండదు. సో ఈక్వల్గా కూడా ఉండదు, ఆల్మోస్ట్ ఈక్వల్ అన్నా ఆల్మోస్ట్ ఈక్వల్ అన్నా కానీ. సో ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి ఏ ఇక్కడ, వెరీ స్మాల్ యాజ్ కంపేర్ టు స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ లైట్. సో ఇక్కడ డ్రిఫ్ట్ వెలాసిటీ అంటే ఏంటంటే 2-3 ఆటమ్స్ కంబైన్ అయినప్పుడు అక్కడ ఉన్న ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ అనేవి ఒకదాని ప్లేస్ ఒకదాని మారుతూ ఉంటాయి. సో ఆ మారేదాన్నే డ్రిఫ్టింగ్ అంటారు. సో దానికి సంబంధించిన వెలాసిటీని డ్రిఫ్ట్ వెలాసిటీ అంటారు. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్ ఇక్కడ 1 కమర్షియల్ యూనిట్ ఆఫ్ ఎనర్జీ ఈక్వల్స్ టు. సో కమర్షియల్ యూనిట్స్ అంటే మనకి రెసిడెన్షియల్గా మన కరెంట్ బిల్ వస్తుంది కదా, సో దాంట్లో వచ్చే యూనిట్ని ఏమంటారండి. సో దాన్ని ఏమంటారు, 1 కిలోవాట్ అవర్. సో 1 కిలోవాట్ అవర్. సో ఇక్కడ నెక్స్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ వచ్చేసి 1 కూలుమ్ ఛార్జ్ ఈక్వల్స్ ద ఛార్జ్ అని. సో ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే 1 కూలుమ్కి ఛార్జ్ అనేది దేనికి ఈక్వల్ అని. సో 1 కూలుమ్ ఛార్జ్ అనేది దేనికి ఈక్వల్ అంటే 6.24 ఇంటూ 10^18 అంటే 6.24 ఇంటూ 10^18 6.24 ఇంటూ 10^18 ఎలక్ట్రాన్ ఫ్లో అవుతుంటే ఎంత ఛార్జ్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ అయిందో 1 కూలుమ్ ఛార్జ్లో కూడా అంత ఛార్జ్ అనేది ఉంటుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ అనేది ఇక్కడ మళ్ళీ ఇన్ గ్యాసెస్ ద ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ కరెంట్ ఈజ్ యూజ్డ్. సో ఇక్కడ ఇంతకుముందు మనం సాలిడ్ గురించి ఇక్కడ గ్యాస్ గురించి ఎలా అంటే ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్, పాజిటివ్ అయాన్స్ అండ్ నెగిటివ్ అయాన్స్, ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్, పాజిటివ్ అయాన్స్ అండ్ నెగిటివ్ అయాన్స్. ఓకే, అండ్ ఇవి ప్రాబ్లంకి సంబంధించిన క్వశ్చన్స్. ఎస్ఐ యూనిట్ ఆఫ్ పవర్. సో ఇక్కడ హెన్రీ ఇచ్చిండు, కూలుంబ్ ఇచ్చిండు, వాట్ ఇచ్చిండు, వాట్ అవర్ ఇచ్చిండు. ఇందాక మనం చూసినాం కూలుంబ్ అంటే ఛార్జ్ అని, కాబట్టి ఛార్జ్ కాదు. అండ్ ఇక్కడ వాట్ అవర్ అంటే ఇందాక మనం చూసినాం కమర్షియల్ యూనిట్ అని. సో హెన్రీ అంటే హెన్రీ దీనికి సంబంధించిన. సో ఇక్కడ ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి వాట్. ఎస్ఐ యూనిట్ ఆఫ్ పవర్ ఇస్ వాట్. అండ్ ఎలక్ట్రికల్ ప్రెషర్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో కాల్డ్ ఎలక్ట్రికల్ ప్రెషర్. సో మామూలుగా మనం కరెంట్ గురించి చదువుకున్నప్పుడు ద ఫ్లో ఆఫ్ ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ ఈజ్ కాల్డ్ కరెంట్ అని అంటాం, కానీ ఆ ఫ్లో కావడానికి వచ్చే ప్రెషర్ ఏమంటాం, ఫ్లో అవ్వడానికి వచ్చే ప్రెషర్ని వోల్టేజ్ అని అంటాం. సో ఇక్కడ ఎలక్ట్రికల్ ప్రెషర్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో కాల్డ్ as voltage. Okay, next, the substances which have a large number of free electrons and offer a low resistance are called. సో ఇక్కడ ఏ సబ్స్టెన్స్లో ఎక్కువ ఫ్రీ ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ ఉంది అంటే తక్కువ రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఉంది. సో ఇక్కడ ఎక్కువ ఫ్రీ ఎలక్ట్రాన్స్ ఉంటే ఎక్కువ కరెంట్ ఫ్లో అవుతుంది, అండ్ తక్కువ రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఉన్నా కానీ ఎక్కువ కరెంట్ ఫ్లో అవుతుంది. సో దేంట్లో ఎక్కువ ఫ్లో అవుతుంది, ఇన్సులేటర్స్లోనా, ఇండక్టర్స్లోనా, సెమీ కండక్టర్స్లో, కండక్టర్స్లో. మనకు తెలిసిందే కండక్టర్స్లో ఎక్కువ కరెంట్ అనేది ఫ్లో అవుతుంది. అండ్ అవుట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఫాలోయింగ్ విచ్ ఈస్ నాట్ ఏ పూర్ కండక్టర్. సో ఇందులో పూర్ కండక్టర్ కానిది ఏది, ఈ మూడిట్లో ఇక్కడ ఉన్న మెటీరియల్స్లో పూర్ కండక్టర్ కానిది ఏది. పూర్ కండక్టర్ అంటే అక్కడ రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది అన్నట్టు. సో కాంది ఏది అని అంటే నార్మల్గా మనం డైరెక్ట్ ఆన్సర్ చెప్పచ్చు కాపర్ అయితే గుడ్ కండక్టర్ అని మనకు తెలుసు. నెక్స్ట్, అవుట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఫాలోయింగ్ విచ్ ఈజ్ అన్ ఇన్సులేటింగ్ మెటీరియల్. సో ఇన్సులేటింగ్ మెటీరియల్ కాపర్, సిల్వర్, గోల్డ్, పేపర్. సో వీటిలో ఇన్సులేటింగ్ మెటీరియల్ ఏంటిది? సో ఇక్కడ ఇన్సులేటింగ్ మెటీరియల్ అంటే ఏంటిది? దానిలో నుంచి కరెంట్ పాస్ కాదు. సో కరెంట్ పాస్ కాదు ఏంటంటే ఇక్కడ పేపర్ నుంచి కరెంట్ అనేది ఫ్లో కాదు. అండ్ ద ప్రాపర్టీ ఆఫ్ ఏ కండక్టర్ డ్యూ టు విచ్ ఇట్ పాసెస్ కరెంట్ ఈస్ కాల్డ్. సో ఏదైనా ఒక కండక్టర్ యొక్క ప్రాపర్టీ ఒకటి ఉంటుంది, ఆ ప్రాపర్టీ వల్లే దాంట్లో నుంచి కరెంట్ పాస్ అవుతుంది. ఆ ప్రాపర్టీని ఏమంటారు అని అడుగుతాను. ఏమంటారు? సో రెసిస్టెన్స్ అంటే ఏమంటే మనం కరెంట్ ఫ్లోని అపోజ్ చేస్తుంది. అండ్ కండక్టెన్స్, సో కండక్టెన్స్ ఈజ్ ద ఆన్సర్. రిలక్టెన్స్ అంటే ఏంటిది? రిలక్టెన్స్ అంటే ఇది మ్యాగ్నెటిక్ ఫీల్డ్ని అపోజ్ చేస్తుంది. ఓకేనా? కండక్టెన్స్ ఈజ్ ద రెసిప్రోకల్ ఆఫ్. సో కండక్టెన్స్ అంటే ఏంటిది? కరెంట్ ఫ్లో కావడం. సో దీని రెసిప్రోకల్ అంటే దీని అపోజిట్ ఏంటిది? కరెంట్ని స్టాప్ చేయడం, అపోజ్ చేయడం. అదేంటిది? రెసిస్టెన్స్. సో ద రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ఏ కండక్టర్ వేరెస్. సో రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ఏ కండక్టర్ వేరెస్ ఇన్వర్స్లీ అంటే, సో దీంట్లో ఈ రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది ఒకవేళ రెసిస్టెన్స్ చేంజెస్ అనేవి జరుగుతాయి. కాకపోతే ఎలా జరుగుతాయి అంటే, దీనికి సంబంధించిన ఈ కింద ఇచ్చిన ఫాలోయింగ్లో ఏదో ఒకటి అది పెరిగితే ఈ రెసిస్టెన్స్ వాల్యూ అనేది తగ్గుతుంది అన్నట్టు. అంటే నార్మల్గా సో ఇక్కడ ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి ఏరియా ఆఫ్ క్రాస్ సెక్షన్. సో రెసిస్టెన్స్కి ఏరియా ఆఫ్ క్రాస్ సెక్షన్ చూసినప్పుడు ఏరియా క్రాస్ సెక్షన్ ఒక నార్మల్ మెటీరియల్కి రెసిస్టెన్స్ని పట్టుకొని రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది అలాగే ఉంచి దాని ఏరియా ఆఫ్ క్రాస్ సెక్షన్ అనేది పెంచినప్పుడు ఏమైందంటే ఆ రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది. సో రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది. సో ఇది మనకు రో L/A అనే ఫార్ములాతో చూస్తాం కదా. R = రో అంటే స్పెసిఫిక్ రెసిస్టెన్స్. సో దాన్ని బట్టి చూసినప్పుడు L అంటే R is డైరెక్ట్లీ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ టు, అంటే ఒక కండక్టర్ లెంత్ ఎంత పెరిగితే దాని రెసిస్టెన్స్ కూడా అంత పెరుగుతుంది. కానీ ఏరియా ఆఫ్ క్రాస్ సెక్షన్ మాత్రం ఎంత పెరిగితే సో దాని రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది అంత డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది. సో విత్ రైజ్ ఇన్ టెంపరేచర్ ద రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్యూర్ మెటల్స్. సో రెసిస్టెన్స్ ప్యూర్ మెటల్స్లో టెంపరేచర్ రైజ్ చేసినప్పుడు దాంట్లో ఉన్న రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది ఏమవుతుంది? ఇంక్రీజ్ అనేది అవుతుంది. సో విత్ ద రైజ్ ఇన్ టెంపరేచర్ ద రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ సెమీ కండక్టర్స్కి కూడా టెంపరేచర్ ఇంక్రీజ్ చేస్తే అప్పుడు దాంట్లో రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఏమవుతుంది? డిగ్రీ అవుతుంది. సెమీ కండక్టర్స్లో డిగ్రీ అవుతుంది, ప్యూర్ మెటల్స్లో ఇంక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది.
विवेक, आप गए नहीं?
सर वो
बेटी का टूर्नामेंट था ना आज?
मीटिंग है सर.
अब जाओ, फोटो जरूर खींचना.
If you allow us, we'd love to.
Chai, garma garam chai for everyone. Whiskey on the rocks, right?
No, totally. Let's go. That's got it for you.
यार परसों इस गधे का फेयरवेल है, मैं सबको ग्रुप पे मैसेज डाल देती हूँ.
ऐसे बुलाएगी सबको? रोया हमेशा के लिए लंदन जा रहा है, पता नहीं यार फिर कब मिलेंगे. तो जो भी करते हैं दिल से करते हैं, है ना?
Yes.
रास्ते जब साथ है डरने की क्या बात है, रोशनी से भरी ये सांस है, मस्ती है और मजाक है, खबरू जैसे बात है, बेहतरीन
Just give me a second, please.
Saturday night meeting.
Saturday, I can't.
I need you, bro.
Saturday. Let's go.
इतना हुआ.
Let's go. Let's go.
और भाई लंदन फुटबॉल के तो वीआईपी टिकट्स तो बनते हैं.
VIP tickets. हलवा है क्या?
गाइस भाई फेयरवेल पे एक लास्ट प्रेजेंटेशन.
Gaurav, dedicated.
हार्ड वर्किंग.
Go getter. Remember this day? सबसे बड़ी डील क्रैक की थी हमने उस दिन. मतलब इतना अपबीट, पैशनेट बंदा मतलब किसको चाहिए? हमें नहीं चाहिए.
नहीं चाहिए.
तू जा यार, तू जा.
अरे नहीं. NBA फाइनल्स पूरी रात नहीं सोए थे हम. It was right after my dad had. What does this guy do? अपनी पढ़ाई छोड़ के he helped me. इस फ्रेंड को कौन मिस करेगा यार?
जिंदगी तू खास है, तेरे जैसी कोई नहीं है. जिंदगी तू खास.
When you want to show how much you care, Canva, दिल से डिजाइन तक.
ఎప్పుడైనా ఇతరుల సంతోషాలను పంచుకుని చూడండి. క్యాడ్బరీ డైరీ మిల్క్.
సో ఈరోజు డీసీ మోటార్కి సంబంధించిన కొన్ని మల్టిపుల్ చాయిస్ క్వశ్చన్స్ అనేవి చూద్దాం. సో దాంట్లో ఫస్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ వచ్చేసి విచ్ ఆఫ్ ది ఫాలోయింగ్ లోడ్ నార్మల్లీ నీడ్స్ స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ మోర్ దెన్ ద రేటెడ్ టార్క్. సో ఇక్కడున్న ఏ లోడ్స్లలో ఎక్కువగా స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ కావాలి అంటే స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ ఎక్కువ ఉండాలి, మళ్ళీ తర్వాత దాని రేటెడ్ టార్క్ అంటే స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ అనేది ఎక్కువ ఉండాలి అన్నట్టు. అలా యూజ్ అయ్యే డివైజ్ ఏంటిది? సో ఏంటిది ఇక్కడ ఆప్షన్ వచ్చేసి సార్ కన్వేయర్స్. నెక్స్ట్ ద స్టార్టింగ్ రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ద డీసీ మోటార్ ఈస్ జనరల్లీ. సో డీసీ రెసిస్టెన్స్ స్టార్టర్ రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ఎ డీసీ మోటార్. డీసీ మోటార్కి ఎలాగా హై స్పీడ్లో వర్క్ చేయాలి కాబట్టి సో డీసీ మోటార్ యొక్క స్టార్టింగ్ రెసిస్టెన్స్ అనేది తక్కువనే ఉంటుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్ స్పీడ్ ఆఫ్ ఎ డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్ ఈస్ ఇన్వర్స్లీ ప్రపోర్షనల్ టు ద ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్. అంటే ఏంటిది? ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ ఎక్కువ ఉంటే స్పీడ్ తక్కువ ఉంటుంది, అదే స్పీడ్ తక్కువ ఉంటే ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది. అంటే సపోజ్ ఒక ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంటు ఉండి ఒక స్పీడ్ ఉందనుకోండి. సో ఈ ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అయిందంటే అక్కడ స్పీడ్ డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది అన్నట్టు. లేదా ఆడ స్పీడ్ అనేది ఇంకెక్కువ స్పీడ్తో తిరుగుతుంది అని అంటే ఇక్కడ ఉన్న ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ అనేది రిడ్యూస్ అవుతుంది అని అన్నట్టు. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్ ఇన్ డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్ ఇఫ్ ద ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ ఈస్ రిడ్యూస్డ్ టు 150%. And next in DC series motor if the armature current is reduced by 50%, the torque of the motor will be equal to అంటే ఇందాక మనం చూసినాం ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ రెడ్యూస్ అయితే స్పీడ్ రెడ్యూస్ అయితే చూసినాం. ఇప్పుడు ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ రెడ్యూస్ అయితే మరి టార్క్ ఏమవుతుంది? సో టార్క్ ఏమవుతుంది అంటే ప్రీవియస్ వాల్యూ అంటే అంతకుముందున్న వాల్యూ కంటే 25% ఉంటుంది. సో అంతకుముందు ఉంటుంటే 100 ఉంటే ఇప్పుడు 25 వాల్యూ అనేది చూపిస్తుంది. అంటే మనం ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ అనేది 50% రెడ్యూస్ చేస్తే ఇక్కడ 25% అనేది చూపిస్తుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్ ద కరెంట్ డ్రాన్ బై ద ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ ఆఫ్ ఎ డీసీ మోటార్ ఈస్ డైరెక్ట్లీ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ టు కరెంట్ డ్రాన్ బై ద ఆర్మేచర్ ఆఫ్ ద డీసీ మోటార్ ఈస్ డైరెక్ట్లీ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ టు ఇందాక మనం చూసినాం ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ తగ్గితే స్పీడ్ పెరుగుతుంది అని అన్నాం. ఇక్కడ ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ తగ్గిస్తే టార్క్ తగ్గుతుంది అంటాం. ఇప్పుడు దీంట్లో మీకు ఐడియా వస్తుంది కదా. ఇప్పుడు నార్మల్గా స్పీడ్ అంటే స్పీడ్కి టార్క్ చూసుకుంటే టార్క్ అనేది ఇన్వర్సల్ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ ఉంది మనకు. స్పీడ్ అనేది ఇన్వర్సల్ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ అంటే ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ తగ్గితే స్పీడ్ అనేది పెరుగుతుంది. సో స్పీడ్ పెరిగితే ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ తగ్గుతుంది. సో అది ఇన్వర్స్ ప్రొపోర్షనల్. డైరెక్ట్ ప్రొపోర్షనల్ అంటే ఆల్రెడీ మనం ఇక్కడ చూసిన ఇందాక మనం ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్ని రెడ్యూస్ చేస్తే టార్క్ కూడా రెడ్యూస్ అవుతుందని ఇందాక ప్రీవియస్ దాంట్లో చూసినాం. సో ఆన్సర్ వచ్చేసి ద టార్క్ రిక్వైర్డ్. నెక్స్ట్, ద పవర్ మెన్షన్ ఆన్ ద నేమ్ ప్లేట్ ఆఫ్ అన్ ఎలక్ట్రికల్ మోటార్ ఇండికేట్స్. సో మామూలుగా ప్రతి దానికి పవర్ ఉంటుంది. ఆ పవర్ అనేది ఎలక్ట్రికల్ మోటార్ మీద ఉన్నదని మెన్షన్ చేస్తే అది ఎట్లుంటుంది, ఎంత ఉంటుంది? సో ఏముంటుంది? సో ఆ పవర్ ఏంటిదంటే అవుట్పుట్ పవర్ అవైలబుల్ అట్ ద షాఫ్ట్. అంటే షాఫ్ట్ దగ్గర ఎంత పవర్ వస్తుందో ఆ పవర్ అనేది దాని మీద మెన్షన్ చేస్తుంది. దేని మీద? మోటార్ మీద మెన్షన్ చేసేది అని. అవుట్పుట్ పవర్ అవైలబుల్ అట్ ద షాఫ్ట్ అంటే షాఫ్ట్ ఎంతలా రొటేట్ అవుతుంది, దాని అవుట్పుట్ అనేది ఏ వాల్యూ ఇస్తుంది అనేది. సో అక్కడ ఇచ్చేది అవుట్పుట్ పవర్ అవైలబుల్ అట్ ద షాఫ్ట్. దేని మీద? మోటార్ మీద ఒక రేటెడ్ ప్లేట్ ఉంటుంది, దాని మీద ఇచ్చే వాల్యూ, దాని అవుట్పుట్ వాల్యూ అనేది ఈ షాఫ్ట్ దగ్గర వచ్చే పవర్ అవుట్పుట్కి సమానం అన్నట్టు. నెక్స్ట్ ఇంకోటి, ఇన్ వార్డ్ లియోనార్డ్ మెథడ్ ఆఫ్ స్పీడ్ కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ డీసీ మోటార్. ఈ స్పీడ్ కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ డీసీ మోటార్ దాంట్లో సో ఇక్కడ వార్డ్ లియోనార్డ్ మెథడ్ అనేది స్పీడ్ కంట్రోల్ చేసే ఒక మెథడ్ అన్నట్టు. అంటే డీసీ మోటార్ స్పీడ్ కంట్రోల్ చేయడానికి యూజ్ చేసే మెథడ్స్లో ఒకటి. సో దీంట్లో స్పీడ్ చేంజ్ అనేది ఎట్లా మనం చేస్తామనంటే, సో ఆల్రెడీ మనకి ఇక్కడ ఇందాక చూసినంత ఆర్మేచర్ కరెంట్తో అన్నాం కదా. సో ఇక్కడ దీంట్లో మాత్రం ఆర్మేచర్ వోల్టేజ్. సో ఆర్మేచర్ వోల్టేజ్ చేయడం వల్ల మన స్పీడ్ అనేది కంట్రోల్ చేయొచ్చు. అంటే సో దీంట్లో మన ఆర్మేచర్ వోల్టేజ్ అనేది చేంజ్ చేస్తే అక్కడ స్పీడ్ కూడా చేంజ్ అయ్యే ఛాన్స్ ఉంటుంది. సో నార్మల్గా మీరు ఇక్కడ చూసుకున్నా కానీ అర్థమైపోతుంది. ఆర్మేచర్ వోల్టేజ్ అనేది చేంజ్ అయితే కరెంట్ కూడా చేంజ్ అవుతుంది. ఎందుకంటే కరెంట్కి వోల్టేజ్ అనేది డైరెక్ట్లీ ప్రొపోర్షనల్. ఓకే, కరెంట్ చేంజ్ అయిందంటే ఇది కూడా చేంజ్ అవుతుంది. సో ఇక్కడ చేంజ్ ఇన్ ఆర్మేచర్ వోల్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ డీసీ మోటార్. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్, ఇన్ విచ్ డీసీ మోటార్ హ్యాస్ గాట్ సెల్ఫ్ లోడింగ్ ప్రాపర్టీ. సెల్ఫ్ లోడింగ్ ప్రాపర్టీ అనేది ఏ డీసీ మోటార్కి ఉంటుంది? సో ఏ డీసీ మోటార్ ఉంది? డిఫరెన్షియల్ కాంపౌండింగ్ మోటార్కి సెల్ఫ్ లోడింగ్ ప్రాపర్టీ అనేది ఉంటుంది. అండ్ విచ్ డీసీ మోటార్ విల్ బి సూటబుల్ అలాంగ్ విత్ flywheel ఫర్ ఇంటర్మీడియట్ లోడ్, లైట్ అండ్ హెవీ లోడ్స్ కోసం ఏ డీసీ మోటార్ సూటబుల్గా ఉంటుంది? సో ఏ డీసీ మోటార్ అంటే క్యూములేటివ్ కాంపౌండ్ డీసీ మోటార్. క్యూములేటివ్ కాంపౌండ్ మోటార్ అనేది సూటబుల్గా ఉంటుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్, ఇఫ్ ద డీసీ షంట్ మోటార్ ఈస్ వర్కింగ్ అట్ నో లోడ్, ఇఫ్ షంట్ ఫీల్డ్ circuit suddenly opens, this will result in. సో ఆల్రెడీ డీసీ షంట్ మోటార్ అనేది లోడ్ లేకుండా నడుస్తుంది అప్పుడు షంట్ ఫీల్డ్ సర్క్యూట్ సడన్లీ ఓపెన్ అయింది. అప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది? సో అక్కడ స్పీడ్ అనేది ఎక్కువ అవుతుంది. దానివల్ల ఆర్మేచర్ అనేది డిస్ట్రాయ్ అవుతుంది. ఓకేనా? సో ఇక్కడ ఉంది, దిస్ విల్ రిజల్ట్ ఇన్ ఎక్సెసివ్ స్పీడ్ పాసిబిలీ డిస్ట్రాయింగ్ ఆర్మేచర్ డ్యూ టు ఎక్సెసివ్ సెంట్రిఫ్యూగల్ ఫోర్సెస్ ఎక్కువ రావడం వల్ల అక్కడ ఉన్న ఆర్మేచర్ అనేది డిస్ట్రాయ్ అవుతుంది. నార్మల్గా మనకు తెలుసు డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్ అనేది ఏంటిది లోడ్లోనే స్టాల్ చేస్తామని. సో ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ డీసీ షంట్ మోటార్ అంటే ఈ షంట్ మోటార్ అనే షంట్ ఫీల్డ్ అనేది తీసేస్తే ఓన్లీ మోటార్ రన్నింగ్ ఉంటుంది. అప్పుడు అది స్పీడ్లో రన్ అవుతుంటుంది కాబట్టి ఇంకా స్పీడ్లో రన్ అవుతుంది. సో ఎక్కువ స్పీడ్ అయ్యేసరికి అక్కడ సెంట్రిఫ్యూగల్ ఫోర్సెస్ అనేవి ఎక్కువ అయితే ఎక్కువ అవుతుంది, ఆర్మేచర్ అనేది డిస్ట్రాయ్ అవుతుంది. అండ్ డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్స్ ఆర్ యూజ్డ్ ఎక్కడ? లోడ్ కాన్స్టెంట్గా ఉన్న అక్కడ యూజ్ చేస్తారా? లోడ్ ఫ్రీక్వెన్సీగా చేంజ్ అక్కడ యూజ్ చేస్తారా? కాన్స్టెంట్ ఆపరేటింగ్ లోడ్ దగ్గర యూజ్ చేస్తారా? ఎక్కడ యూజ్ చేస్తారన్నది. సో ఇక్కడ లోడు DC series motors are used where load is constant, load changes frequently, where constant ఆపరేటింగ్ స్పీడ్, కాన్స్టెంట్ ఆపరేటింగ్ స్పీడ్ కాదు, లోడ్ కాదు. సో ఇక్కడ ఉన్న ఏ సిచ్యువేషన్ దగ్గర కూడా అంటే అనుకొని లోడ్ కాన్స్టెంట్గా ఉన్నది అనుకొని యూజ్ చేయరు. ఎందుకంటే డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్కి మనం ఆచుడుతోనే లోడ్తోనే స్టార్ట్ చేస్తాం కాబట్టి ఇంకా వేరే యూజెస్ అని ఉంటాయి కాబట్టి అక్కడ ఉన్నది. అండ్ లోడ్ ఫ్రీక్వెంట్లీ చేంజింగ్ దగ్గర కూడా వాడరు. అంటే మెయిన్ పర్పస్ అనేది డీసీ సిరీస్ అనేది హై అప్లికేషన్స్కి వాడతారు కాబట్టి. సో ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చిన మాత్రం కాదన్నట్టు. అంటే ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చిన ఓన్లీ లోడ్ కాన్స్టెంట్ ఉన్న కాడ వాడతారా, లోడ్ చేంజెస్ దగ్గర వాడతారా, ఏదైనా అనేది ఇది మెయిన్గా మెన్షన్ చేయరు కాబట్టి ఇది కాదు. ఓకే. నెక్స్ట్, ఫర్ ద సేమ్ హెచ్పి రేటింగ్ అండ్ ఫుల్ లోడ్ స్పీడ్ ఫాలోయింగ్ మోటార్ హ్యాస్ పూర్ స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్. అంటే ఒక 2 మోటార్లకు హెచ్పి రేటింగ్ సేమ్ ఉంటుంది, ఫుల్ లోడ్ స్పీడ్ అనేది సేమ్ ఉంటుంది. కానీ అట్లా 2 సేమ్ ఉన్నప్పుడు ఏ మోటార్ దగ్గర స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ అనేది తక్కువ ఉంటుంది. ఏ మోటార్ దగ్గర డిఫరెన్షియల్ కాంపౌండెంట్ మోటార్ దగ్గర స్టార్టింగ్ టార్క్ అనేది తక్కువ ఉంటుంది. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్, ఇన్ కేస్ ఆఫ్ conductively compensated DC series motor, the compensating winding is provided. So conductively compensated DC series motorలో కంపెన్సేటింగ్ వైండింగ్ అనేది ప్రొవైడ్ చేసింది. అది ఎలా ఉంటుంది అన్నట్టు. సో ఎలా ఉంటుంది, ఇన్ సిరీస్ విత్ ద ఆర్మేచర్ వైండింగ్. ఓకే. నెక్స్ట్, స్పార్కింగ్ అట్ ద కమ్యూటేటర్ ఆఫ్ ద DC మోటార్ మే రిజల్ట్ ఇన్. సో డీసీ మోటార్ కమ్యూటేటర్ దగ్గర స్పార్క్స్ అనేవి వచ్చేసినాయి. అవి ఎట్లా వస్తాయంటే దేనివల్ల వస్తాయి అనేది. సో ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చిన అన్ని ఆప్షన్స్ కరెక్ట్. డ్యామేజ్ టు ద కమ్యూటేటర్ సెగ్మెంట్ డ్యామేజ్ అయినప్పుడు, లేదా కంప్యూటర్ ఇన్సులేషన్ డ్యామేజ్ అయినప్పుడు, పవర్ కన్జంప్షన్ అనేది ఇంక్రీజ్ అయినప్పుడు, ఈ 3 కేసెస్లో స్పార్క్స్ అనేవి ప్రొడ్యూస్ అవుతాయి. నెక్స్ట్, విచ్ ఆఫ్ ద ఫాలోయింగ్ మోటార్ ఈస్ ప్రిఫర్డ్ ఫర్ ఆపరేషన్ ఇన్ హైలీ ఎక్స్ప్లోజివ్ అట్మాస్ఫియర్. సో ఇక్కడ హైలీ ఎక్స్ప్లోజివ్ అట్మాస్ఫియర్ దగ్గర ఏది వాడతారంటే ఎయిర్ మోటార్ అనేది యూజ్ చేస్తారు. ఓకే. నెక్స్ట్, ఇఫ్ ద సప్లై వోల్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ ఎ డీసీ మోటార్ ఈజ్ ఇంక్రీజ్డ్, విచ్ ఆఫ్ ద ఫాలోయింగ్ విల్ డిక్రీజ్. సప్లై వోల్టేజ్ ఈజ్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అయింది, సప్లై వోల్టేజ్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అయినప్పుడు డిక్రీజ్ కావాలి. ఏంది, ఫుల్ లోడ్ కరెంట్ అనేది డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది. When the speed of a DC motor increases, సప్లై వోల్టేజ్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అయినప్పుడు ఫుల్ లోడ్ కరెంట్, అదే స్పీడ్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అయినప్పుడు బ్యాక్ ఈఎంఎఫ్ కూడా ఇంక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది అండ్ కరెంట్ డిక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది, బ్యాక్ ఈఎంఎఫ్ ఇంక్రీజ్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే. యాజ్ కంపేర్ టు ఇండక్షన్ మోటార్, ద ఎయిర్ గ్యాప్ ఇన్ ఏ డీసీ మోటార్ ఇస్. అంటే ఇండక్షన్ మోటార్ దాన్ని కంపేర్ చేసుకుంటే డీసీ మోటార్స్లో ఎయిర్ గ్యాప్ ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది అన్నట్టు, మోర్. ఫీల్డ్ వైండింగ్ ఆఫ్ ఎ డీసీ సిరీస్ మోటార్ ఇస్ యూజువల్లీ ప్రొవైడెడ్ విత్ ద థిక్ వైర్. అంటే థిక్ వైర్తోని చేస్తారు అన్నట్టు. ఎందుకు అంటే యాసిడ్ క్యారీస్ లార్జ్ లోడ్ కరెంట్. సో అది చాలా థిక్ వైర్తో చేస్తారు. ఎందుకు చేస్తారంటే అది ఎక్కువ లోడ్ కరెంట్ని క్యారీ చేస్తుంది కాబట్టి దానికోసం ఫీల్డ్ వైండింగ్ తక్కువ థిక్ వైర్తోని చేస్తారు. ఓకే. Which one of the following is not the function of a pole switch in DC motions? సో ఏది ఫంక్షన్ కాదు అని అన్నాడు. సో పోల్ స్విచ్ ఎడ్డీ కరెంట్ లాస్ రెడ్యూస్ చేసేదానికైతే పోల్ స్విచ్ అనేది యూజ్ చేయరు. సో ఇక్కడ ఈ ఆప్షన్ మనకు కరెక్ట్ అయిపోతుంది. సో అయితే ఈ ఒక్క ఆప్షన్ కాదంటే ఈ పోల్ స్విచ్ అనేవి ఈ 3 ఆప్షన్ ఉంది. ఎందుకు అవుతుంది ఈ పోల్ స్విచ్ అనేది? టు సపోర్ట్ ద ఫీల్డ్ కాయిల్స్ అండ్ టు స్ప్రెడ్ ద ఫ్లక్స్ ఫర్ బెటర్ యూనిఫార్మిటీ, టు రెడ్యూస్ ద రిలక్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ద మ్యాగ్నెటిక్ పాత్. సో ఇక్కడ మనకు తెలుసు డీసీ మెషిన్స్లో పోల్ స్విచ్ అనేది ఎందుకు యూజ్ అవుతుంది అంటే వీటి కోసం ఏమవుతుంది. ఎందుకంటే డీసీలో ఏమవుతుంది, ఫీల్డ్ అనేది నార్మల్గా ప్రొడ్యూస్ అవుతుంది. అది మొత్తం ఫీల్డ్ కాయిల్స్ ఉంటాయి కదా, ఆ ఫీల్డ్ కాయిల్స్కి తోనే జనరేట్ అవుతుంది. కాబట్టి ఇప్పుడు మ్యాగ్నెట్ ఫీల్డ్ జనరేట్ అంటే ఫీల్డ్ కాయిల్స్కి కరెంట్ రావాలి. ఆ ఫీల్డ్ కాయిల్స్కి సపోర్ట్గా ఈ పోల్ స్విచ్ అనేది యూజ్ చేస్తారు. ఈ పోల్ స్విచ్ వల్ల ఇంకో బెనిఫిట్ ఏంటంటే ఆ ఫ్లక్స్ కూడా ఏమవుతుంది అంటే స్ప్రెడ్ అవుతుంది అంటే దాని స్ట్రక్చర్ వల్ల. అండ్ నెక్స్ట్, The mechanical power developed by a shunt motor will be maximum when the ratio of back EMF to applied voltage is. So mechanical power developed by a shunt motor. షంట్ మోటార్లో డెవలప్ అయిన మెకానికల్ పవర్ మ్యాక్సిమం ఎప్పుడు అవుతుందంటే బ్యాక్ ఈఎంఎఫ్ బై అప్లైడ్ వోల్టేజ్ ఈక్వల్ టు 1/2. అంటే ఇక్కడ 0.5 ఇచ్చారు కానీ అక్కడ 1/2. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్ ద కండిషన్ ఆఫ్ ఎ మ్యాక్సిమం పవర్ ఇన్ ఏ డీసీ మోటార్ ఇస్. సో మ్యాక్సిమం పవర్ అంటే ఇందాక మనం చెప్పిందే ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చిండు. సో ఇందాకేమన్నాం బ్యాక్ ఈఎంఎఫ్ బై అప్లై వోల్టేజ్ ఈక్వల్ టు 0.5 ఆర్ 1/2 అని. ఇక్కడ దీన్ని చేంజ్ చేసి బ్యాక్ ఈఎంఎఫ్ ఈక్వల్ టు 1/2 ఇంటూ సప్లై వోల్టేజ్. ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Welcome to lecture 4 in this NPTEL online certification course on bioreactors, the 10-hour 10-hour course. In the last lecture, lecture number 3, we had looked at how to solve problems in general, and we solved a problem related to the sterilization kinetics. One of the things I'd like you to note, keep in mind and check always is after you arrive at the final answer, please check whether it makes some sense. For example, if you had seen or gotten an answer of about 7,500 hours or something like that, then you need to go back and check your calculations. It's always good to check your calculations after you finish, but always keep the reality of the number that you get in mind. 7,500 hours seems a little odd for any situation. Experience always helps you to have a better idea of expected numbers, but even otherwise, 7,500 hours when you're looking at a bioreactor, it seems a little odd. At the same time, if you had gotten an answer of about 10⁻³ seconds, it seems ridiculously short. So under both these situations, I think it's good to check the approach, the math and the overall calculations. Okay. This is something similar. Suppose you are working on, let's say, pipe sizes, and you get an answer of about 50 meters. The pipe diameter is 50 meters. Just taking an odd example, 50-meter diameter is something unimaginable. A pipe size having a 50-meter diameter is unimaginable. So you should always have this picture of your answer in mind and check it. Please do it every time. I will again emphasize this when we do the next practice problem. Now let us continue with module 2 is on biomass cells and bioproducts, biomass or cells and bioproducts, and these are the two important outcomes of any bioprocess. They could be cells themselves or they could be molecules made by these cells. Let us look at these one by one. Sometimes the cells themselves are the product. Might seem a little odd in the beginning, but let us consider this. I'm sure you'd have heard of artificial organs. Artificial skin was, I think, the first popular organ that was made outside and then put on to burn victims so that they could heal faster and so on. Nowadays we have many different organs produced artificially in appropriate bioreactors. The bioreactors themselves might look a little different. The cells grow on a scaffold that resemble the organ, and therefore you get the shape, and then the functionality is brought in, and so on and so forth, so that you have a functional organ which can be transplanted into, probably in the place of an organ that has gone bad. You definitely have liver, kidney, and so on and so forth that are made that way. We did talk of skin, which is popular. You could also grow stem cells, which are used for a variety of purposes using bioreactors. In all these situations, the cells themselves are the main product from the bioreactor, and all effort goes to making sure that you have the required cell concentration, the required, they should grow in the required way, and so on and so forth, and they should also proper functionally when grown in bioreactors. I think I have a video here as a suggested video. This is from the file that is available to you, websites, videos, and papers recommended. I should also add this disclaimer that IIT Madras and I do not recommend or endorse any of the commercial brands that may be depicted in some of these sources below. The sources were chosen for their pedagogic value. This is number 12 that I just mentioned, bioreactor for tissue engineering. This is the link. You can click on the link and go and see the video, which gives you some idea as to how bioreactors are used for making organs. You may have heard of something called spirulina. Spirulina is an algae. It is grown and then processed and packaged, and that is sold as nutraceuticals. Many people consume that. These are grown in large bioreactors. In fact, they are grown in ponds, which act as bioreactors for the appropriate production of spirulina, and there the spirulina cells themselves become the product of interest. Similar is the case with something called single cell protein. Single cell protein was very popular in the 1970s and 80s and so on as fodder for cattle. They are nothing but yeast cells, and they are also grown in bioreactors, processed, and then provided as fodder for the cattle. In these two cases, spirulina and single cell protein, the cells themselves are the products. However, as we have already seen in the introduction, there are very many other products. I think we saw insulin, monoclonal antibodies, ethanol, bio oil, and so on and so forth, that the cells produce. These are the molecules that are produced by the cells, and they are the products. So there are two major types of products: the cells themselves, or the molecules that are made by the cells, which are the main products from bioreactors. Okay. In the initial lectures, we saw the need to use rates while considering dynamic systems. We said rate is a central parameter on which we base our decisions, and so on. Therefore, that is considered as the main parameter. We don't consider amounts and so on and so forth, which can get a little confusing for the kind of decisions that we need to make while dealing with dynamic systems, engineering systems, and so on. So we will also consider rates. Everything will be geared toward rates. The models will be geared towards rates, mathematical models will be geared towards rates, all the discussion would be geared towards rates, and so on and so forth. You need to internalize this. This takes a while for internalization, especially since some of these concepts were introduced to you at the school level from the point of view of a batch system, where some approximations work, but not in all cases, and especially not in a continuous case. You need to internalize that. I will keep repeating this till it gets across. The rates of cell multiplication on one hand and the rate of product formation are the important rates for us, right? And what is cell multiplication? One cell becoming 2 cells, in the bioreactor becoming 4 cells, and so on and so forth. Okay. In other words, the culture in the bioreactor is growing, right? Therefore, cell multiplication, culture growth, or just growth, all mean the same thing. The cells, you would have probably learnt in a basic biology course, they undergo something called a cell cycle, and that is also sometimes seen as some sort of a growth, not always. But we are not talking about that. We are talking of the multiplication of cells. You need to keep this in mind. It's not the cell volume changing during the cell cycle and so on and so forth. Each cell's volume is changing during the cell cycle. That is not what we consider growth here. This is culture growth or the cell multiplication. If we consider single cell, the simplest mathematical representation or a mathematical model is as follows. The rate of cell growth as given by Rx is directly proportional to the cell concentration x, the first order model, or equals a certain mu into x. Note that mu may or may not be a constant depending on the situation. Okay, you need to again internalize this. Mu may or may not be a constant. And also there are organisms called molds. For example, Aspergillus niger is a common mold that grows on bread. They are these stringy organisms that grow by extension of their strands, or the hyphae as they are called. They extend, their mass increases, but the number is still all limited to just that one, with the mass increasing. In such a case, this may not be valid if x is the number concentration of the cells. You need to keep this in mind. We will use this model as needed. In this lecture, I am going to present some concepts and we will use the concepts a little later. So let's just focus on the concepts in this particular lecture. This is not the only model that is available for cell growth. There are many such models, and we will see some of them. This is an introductory course, so we'll see only some of them. One other model, I think I'll just show you just one other model. It's called the logistic equation, which is helpful in certain situations, where Rx, the rate of growth, equals k into x into a 1 minus beta x, where k and beta are the model parameters which change according to the system. And this goes with the condition that x equals the initial cell concentration x0 at time t equals 0. This is called the logistic equation, which is valid under certain circumstances. And in an advanced course, one can consider structured models which essentially consist of or take into account compartmentalization in the cell. They could be actual compartments such as the nucleus, the mitochondria, and so on and so forth, or they could be even conceptual. Okay. Some examples of the compartmental or the structured models are compartmental models, metabolic models, cybernetic models, and so on and so forth. This being an introductory course, let's not get into the details, but you need to probably be exposed to them so that you'll be able to recognize them when you see them in the future. Then there could be some models which take into account the distribution and ages of cells in the culture. The above models, the Rx equals mu x or Rx equals kx into 1 minus beta x, the logistic equation, they considered all the cells to be at the same age in the bioreactor. That need not be true. There could be a variation in the ages of cells, and that distribution, the variation, is taken into account in the segregated models. Okay. The substrates, something called substrates. We have already seen what a substrate is. We'll see that in detail now. Are converted to cells through cell multiplication and bioproducts. The bioproducts could be made by the metabolic reactions inside the cells or the genetic processes inside the cells. The genetic processes are transcription, translation, the gene, which is a part of the DNA, that gets transcribed, translated to probably a protein. The protein could be a product. That's what we mean by the product resulting from a genetic process. Or it could be a metabolite that is made by the metabolic reactions in the bioreactor. So let us look closer at the substrates. What are substrates? In layman's terms, substrates are raw materials that are food for the cells, and a typical example is glucose. C6H12O6, the carbohydrate glucose, is a nice example of the substrate. Why are we looking at glucose? Because glucose is the starting point of an important metabolic pathway in the cell called glycolysis, and glycolysis has importance from the energy aspects too. It provides energy to the cell. It is necessary to provide energy to the cell and so on. Usually glucose, which is provided in the extracellular space, gets transported into the cell through glucose transporters in the membrane. Then it gets converted to glucose 6-phosphate through an enzymatic reaction, and to fructose 6-phosphate through another enzymatic reaction, and so on and so forth, until it reaches what is called a pyruvate, which is an important branch point in the metabolic pathway. The glycolysis itself is supposed to be from glucose to pyruvate. So since this is an important set of reactions, important metabolic pathway that takes place in the cell, glucose is a typical substrate that is considered. There are many other substrates that can get utilized through other such metabolic pathways in the cell. Let's not get into the details. Glucose is not the only substrate, but it's a very common substrate. In fact, many times if there is a mixture of substrates, cells tend to prefer glucose sometimes. However, from an industry perspective, glucose is expensive. So if you start with an expensive raw material, expensive substrate, the product is going to turn out to be more expensive. So if you have an alternative for glucose that is not as expensive, then that's much better for the industry. So because it reduces the cost of the bioprocess. Very common alternatives for glucose are starch, the same starch that you know of, cellulose. All the wood around you contains cellulose, and lignocellulosic materials. Lignocellulosic materials are currently being researched heavily for as a glucose source. Cellulose and lignocellulosic materials are found abundantly in all the plants. Wood is all that, and they are alternative sources of glucose. You may or may not have considered this. The source for all the photosynthetic, the carbon source for all the photosynthetic organisms happens to be the CO2 in the air. So all the wood, the carbon in the wood that you find came from CO2 in the air, although it is 0.3-0.4% now, and is implicated in global warming and so on. That is the source of carbon for photosynthetic organisms. Starch and cellulose happen to be polymers of glucose. For example, if this is one glucose molecule here, that you see, this is oxygen here. I have not indicated, but this is oxygen. This is carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5, carbon 6, C6H12O6. So this is the pyranose form as written here. And then connected to other glucose molecules this way, this is one form of starch called amylose. So if you break down these bonds from starch, then you can get glucose for the cells to consume. Starch is found in abundance, and therefore it is less expensive than glucose, and therefore starch can be a source of glucose for the cells. The cellulose happens to have a slightly different branching. Amylose and amylopectin is starch, and then cellulose is slightly different bonding and branching, and so on and so forth. So they are all polymers of starch. If you find a way by which you can break down the bonds in between them and release the monomers, then they become available for the cells to consume and produce a product of interest. In general, a medium, we had talked of media earlier, that's the complex the substance in which cells grow. It provides all the nutrients for the cells to grow, that is for the culture to for the cells to multiply, the culture to grow, and so on. The medium could either be complex or be defined. Defined just means that you know everything that is there. Complex means you may not know all the details of the medium. In general, a medium contains a carbon source. Glucose is a very common carbon source. We did talk of carbon dioxide being the carbon source in the case of plants. An energy source, which leads to the formation of ATP and so on and so forth. It could be the same as carbon source, or it could be different. The glucose gets into this pathway, glycolysis, and then another pathway called the TCA cycle, and then oxidative phosphorylation, and thereby produces ATP. In this case, the glucose itself is the energy source. Many times you could have other pathways that produce energy, and the energy source could be different from the carbon source. Glutamine is sometimes the energy source for mammalian cells, and so on. A nitrogen source, because cells require nitrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, phosphorus, and so on are the essential elements that are present in living systems, in cells. The medium contains salts. The medium could contain trace nutrients such as vitamins, minerals, and so on. So this is what a medium in general contains. We looked at a substrate, glucose, the way to get glucose from other things, and so on. Now we need to look at something called a limiting substrate. Now we look at some 2 or 3 concepts, or 3 or 4 concepts. We will not use them now, but we will try to understand what they are, use them later. The limiting substrate is one such concept. The limiting substrate is similar to the concept of limiting reactant. You all know what a limiting reactant is in the case of chemical reactions. The limiting reactant is the one, the concentration of which limits the extent of reaction, or the one that gets consumed first in a batch. In a batch is important there. We'll say that the concentration of which limits the extent of the reaction. That is called a limiting reactant. Let us see an example to understand this a little better. Let us consider the following stoichiometry. 2A plus 3B gives you B. In other words, 2 moles of A needs 3 moles of B to react completely to give you 1 mole of B. If it happens that the input stream to the reactor, let's say it's a continuous process, there is an input stream to the reactor. This contains 10 molar concentration of A and 10 molar concentration of B. Okay, this is molar is nothing but moles per liter. This is concentration of A, concentration of B. Then the reaction is going to be limited by B. Okay, this is because the 10 molar concentration of A would require 3 by 2 into 10 molar concentration of B to react completely. Okay, there is 15 molar concentration of B to get completely consumed, and since only 10 molar concentration of B is present, B will limit the reaction, and A will be left over, and therefore B, which is the limiting reactant. Similarly, the substrate in the medium that limits growth is called the limiting substrate. Okay. You could have many different substrates. We talked of a carbon source, a nitrogen source, an energy source, and all that. The one that is going to limit growth is going to be your limiting substrate. If we consider the limiting substrate, and let us say if S is the limiting substrate, then the variation of the specific growth rate mu, remember that Rx equals mu x we said. So let us say this is the same mu here. The variation of specific growth rate with substrate concentration is given in this graph. This is a rectangular hyperbola. It increases and then it saturates somewhere here to a value of mu m, maximum specific growth rate. Okay. There is a way of mathematically representing this. This is a rectangular hyperbola, so a rectangular hyperbola equation would describe this appropriately, and this is the equation that we are talking about. Mu equals mu m, the maximum value here, times S divided by Ks plus S would describe this kind of a behavior. This is the well-known monod model which gives the effect of substrate concentration on the growth rate of cells. If it happens to be here, if you have enough substrate and you happen to be in this regime, then mu becomes a constant equals mu m. Okay, that is the situation when you have mu m as a constant. In general, Rx equals mu x need not be a constant. If you have enough substrate, then mu equals mu m, which happens to be a constant. Let us look at what happens when Ks equals S. When Ks equals S, in the monod model we substitute S for Ks. Let us see what happens then. So mu equals mu m S by Ks plus S. This is the monod model. Replace Ks by S. You have 2S, S plus S, 2S in the denominator. Mu m S by 2S, S gets cancelled out. You get mu m by 2. Therefore, when S equals Ks, when you have the substrate concentration equal to Ks, or when Ks happens to be the substrate concentration, then your mu happens to be mu m by 2, or half maximal specific growth rate. Okay. So Ks is the substrate concentration at which you get half maximal growth rate. Okay. There are many other types of effects of substrate on growth rate, many other ways of representing them. Okay. Let's look at a few of them here. The other models for the effect of substrate and product also in this case, product would also affect the specific growth rate. For example, I think we did mention ethanol beyond a certain percentage, some 18% or so. It starts affecting the growth rate of cells. That can also be represented. I'll give you some brief representations here. There are many models. Some of them are mu equals mu m into S power n divided by Ks plus S power n. This is called the Moser model, where you have mu m, Ks and n as the parameters of the model. This is one other model. When two substrates are limiting simultaneously, this can also happen, then mu equals mu m into S1 divided by K1 plus S1 into S2 divided by K2 plus S2. This model is very popular when two substrates are simultaneously limiting. When the substrate happens to limit growth, some substrates do that, then you could use this model, which was given by Andrews and Nowak. Mu equals mu m S by Ks plus S into Ki, the inhibition constant, Ki by Ki plus S. This is the Andrews and Nowak model. And I'll probably mention one more model, which is the Jerusalemsky and Neranova model, which gives actually the effect of product inhibition on the growth. Mu equals mu m S by Ks plus S into Kp by Kp plus P. Okay. So far, we looked at models that describe growth, okay, a specific growth rate and so on. Specific growth rate also. Now let us look at the product if it happens to be another molecule apart from the cells, or the molecule made by the cells. A very simple model, a widely used model, is called the Ludeking-Pire model for the product formation rate. Okay, note that again these are all models for rates. The Ludeking-Pire model goes as something like this: Rp equals alpha times Rx plus beta times x. The product formation rate equals something called a growth dependent parameter times the rate of cell growth plus a growth independent parameter times the cell concentration. Okay. There are growth dependent products and growth independent products. Growth dependent products are sometimes called primary metabolites. Growth independent products are sometimes called secondary metabolites. These are loose associations, but this is what we need to look at. Rp equals alpha times Rx. The product formation rate depends on growth rate and the cell concentration. This is sometimes beta could be 0, sometimes alpha could be 0, and so on. Many other models are available. We will probably not look at other models in this particular course, but just remember that many other models are available. The next concept that we are going to look at, useful concept, is called the yield coefficient. It's a very simple concept but useful, and you could define many yield coefficients. For example, y of x slash s, yield of cells with respect to substrate, that's the way to read this. Yield of cells with respect to substrate equals or is defined as the amount of cells produced divided by the amount of substrate consumed. It's a rate of the amounts of cells produced by the substrate consumed. Similarly, you could define a yield of product with respect to substrate, which is amount of product formed divided by the amount of substrate consumed. And one more, yield of cells with respect to product, amount of cells produced divided by the amount of product formed. Both are formed in this case. Sometimes it's formed, sometimes consumed. You can define whatever yield coefficient that you can. The advantage in doing this is that the yield coefficient can be assumed constant for a certain small region of interest. That is why it becomes very useful, and the constancy is usually a good assumption if the region happens to be small. We will see how this is done. If the usefulness of this, once it is defined, is that if you know one rate, you could estimate the other rate from the relevant yield coefficient. For example, if the substrate consumption rate is needed and is not known, but the growth rate is known, you could estimate the substrate consumption rate from the growth rate if the yield coefficient is known and can be taken to be a constant. For example, the substrate consumption rate Rs is 1 by Yx times Rx. This comes directly from the definition of the yield coefficient itself. Amount of cells produced by the amount of substrate consumed, those are amounts, is the yield coefficient. Therefore, if you are looking at substrate, it will be 1 by y-axis times Rx. This is rate of substrate consumption, rate of cell formation. So, going by our first model, this can be written as Rx equals mu x. Therefore, Rs equals 1 by y-axis times mu x. We will actually use these to compute some useful parameters in the next module. For now, just know about this. Probably tell you one more thing. One more concept, and I think we will stop finish up this module here. This is the concept of maintenance. The substrate, glucose for example, goes towards cell multiplication or culture growth. Cells multiplying, culture growth. But the cells are complex systems. They have a lot of reactions happening in them. They have a lot of processes happening in them. There's a lot of genes going to proteins, sort of transport happening in them, ATP being made, ATP being used, all kinds of things are happening. And energy is required for all of them. And the substrate needs to provide energy for such processes. So such processes such as metabolism, transport, genetic transformations, genetic processes and so on and so forth are called cell maintenance. So the substrate goes for cell maintenance, and once this is satisfied, then it goes for cell multiplication. We didn't consider this explicitly so far. We need to consider this because when the substrate level is low, it goes completely towards cell maintenance activities and no growth is apparent. No growth is observed. Apparent means observed. No growth is observed. So it's all going to cell maintenance. There will be substrate consumption, but it doesn't show up as growth, which means everything is going to maintain the cell, maintain the activities of the cell. A way of representing this in terms of rates is the rate of growth equals an apparent specific growth rate, an observed specific growth rate times the cell concentration x. And this apparent specific growth rate can be defined as the difference between the true specific growth rate, which is obtained when all the substrate goes towards cell multiplication alone. It's a concept, mu t, true specific growth rate, and the difference between mu t and something called an endogenous metabolism constant. Mu a is the apparent or the observed specific growth rate, mu t is the true specific growth rate, and Ke is the endogenous metabolism constant. So mu a equals mu t minus Ke. And using the yield coefficient, Rs, the substrate consumption rate, is 1 by y-axis apparent, the yield, apparent yield, times apparent specific growth rate into cell concentration, plus something called m into cell concentration, where m is the specific maintenance rate. I think this is a nice place to close this particular lecture. We did see quite a lot of concepts. Very briefly, we saw that the cells themselves could be products. Very quickly, let us go through what all we saw. And there could be other products that are made. We are looking at writing down expressions for rates of these, rate of growth or cell multiplication and rate of product formation. Initially, we saw expressions for rate of growth, Rx equals mu x. Mu may or may not be a constant depending on the situation. Then we said that there are other models. This is the logistic equation, and in an advanced course one can consider structured models, segregated models, and many other things. The substrates are converted into cells and products. We saw that glucose is a typical substrate because it participates in one of the important metabolic pathway in the cell called glycolysis. And we saw some alternatives for glucose because glucose is expensive from the context of the industry. Starch cellulose and lignocellulosic materials are good alternatives to glucose. Starch and cellulose are already heavily used. Lignocellulosic materials, there's a lot of research going on in use of lignocellulosic materials to get glucose. Then we saw what a medium contained: a carbon source, an energy source, a nitrogen source, salts, and trace nutrients. Any of them could be a limiting substrate. If it is a limiting substrate which limits growth, then the variation of specific growth rate with the variation in concentration is given by the Monod's model. And there is an interpretation for this Ks, which is the substrate concentration at half maximal growth rate. Then we said that there are other models for the effect of substrate product concentration on mu. We saw a few of them: Moser model, and the model when two substrates are simultaneously limiting, Andrews and Novak model, which gives you the effect of substrate inhibition, and the model by Jerusal, Limsky, and Neronova, which gives the effect of product inhibition on growth. Then we looked at the very popular model called the Ludeking-Piret model for the product formation rate. which goes as Rp equals alpha times Rx, the growth dependent parameter, plus beta times x, the growth independent parameter, and many other models are available. Then we saw what yield coefficients were. Many yield coefficients could be defined. It is essentially amount per amount, and then they can be used to convert one rate into the other. That's one of the ways in which we will be using them. And then we looked at the concept of maintenance, which is the substrate going to maintain the activities in the cell first, such as metabolism, transport, and other things, genetic processes, and then after satisfying this, it goes towards multiplication. Therefore, when the substrate level is very low, one may not see growth at all. That is represented by the apparent growth rate and the true growth rate, and an endogenous metabolism constant Ke, mu t minus Ke equals mu a, and also the rate of substrate consumption can be written in terms of the apparent specific growth rate and a specific maintenance rate. Okay. I think that is good enough for lecture number 4. See you again in lecture number 5 soon.
Hi everyone, I welcome you all to the live session on Data Analytics full course by IntelliPad. This session is conducted by multiple experts who will be teaching you all about data analytics from basics to advanced level. But before we begin the session, make sure to hit the subscribe button and also hit on the bell icon so that you will never miss an update from us. Now let's see the agenda. Firstly, we will begin with Introduction to Data Analysis. In that, we will be explaining you what is data analysis, why do we require that, and types of data analysis. Once we finish that, we will explain you about the life cycle of data analysis. Then later on, we will tell you how to become data analyst, what are the skills required, job and career prospects of data analyst. Post that, we will learn about pandas and data analysis using pandas. Then later on, we will learn about exploratory data analysis and also NumPy. Then later on, we will be doing a very quick hands-on demo on how to create NumPy array. After that, we will be seeing the difference between a data analyst and data scientist. Then finally, we will be covering data analyst interview questions and answers. So, this is the agenda of the video. Without any further delay, let's get started.
We've all heard this term somewhere. It pretty much rings a bell that every time we think about it, right? So analytics with respect to data. Well, what are we trying to analyze is what we need to know here, right? So the formal definition of how it goes, it's basically extracting meaningful information from raw data. It's as simple as that. So we have data, right? So consider anything to be data. If that is not useful to you at that point, it is considered as data. But then if you perform some operation on this data and make sure that it is useful for your organization, this is when the data becomes information. And this information is what is usable for you, right? So the process of pretty much converting raw data into information by performing certain analysis on it can be termed as data analytics, guys. I mean, this is just a very rough definition of what goes in the industry. To give you a better insight of what that means, basically it is the pursuit of extracting meaning from raw data using specialized computer systems, guys. And then these systems, they transform, they organize, and they model the data. End of it is to basically draw the conclusions from all of the data. So you'll have, again, as I've mentioned with the raw example, our goal here is to basically draw conclusions, to identify patterns, to make use of this raw information in a better way. I mean, sure, data can just be used in its raw form, but then not with every case, right? And to give you an example, so think of the data, probably you understand. So let's say you're looking at a huge data set which contains thousands of values. Those are just numbers, right? So having these numbers, sure, as a data analyst, you will understand what you're doing. But then let's say you need to explain it to a person who doesn't know what data analytics is, or you need to explain it to someone, probably your peer or someone above you as well. Let's say you have a business meeting where you have to explain this. Giving the numbers will not really be that great, right? It will not make a very good presentation. So converting all of these numerical data, making it into graphs, making it in a way where everyone understands the data, and then showing out graphically whatever insights that you can generate from the data, that can be considered as data analytics as well, guys. Again, today basically the field of data analytics is ever so growing rapidly. And why is it growing so rapidly? Well, because the market demand for it is that much. So we have pretty much every startup companies these days have a requirement for big data as well. So big data, to dumb down the definition, it pretty much means a huge amount of data that cannot be handled by just one machine. If you're stretching out your data across multiple nodes, you have data coming in from various sources. Then you need a method to handle all of this big data that's coming in, to process the data and then to perform analysis on it, guys. So this has been in demand in the market for a while, and for the last couple of years, data analytics has been in the boom, and then it's providing a very straight answer to all of the questions being raised about how all these can be handled, guys. And of course, we're going to need the people who have the skills which is needed, skills which are needed to manipulate all the data queries, to translate all these numbers into graphs, and to make insightful analysis on it, right? So that's what is the main key role of a data analytic person. What is the need for data analytics if you have to break it down into 3 steps, guys? So again, we already know that it is on the rise, right? So I can pretty much go about to step out into the open and then tell you that it is not soon that it will be an integral part of an organization. It is already an integral part of every organization there is, guys. So the first important need is, again, we already know that it is a top priority for all of these organizations, ranging from the small organizations all the way to the big guys. And then this is needed to make very good decision making. Well, with respect to you being confused to, let's say, take a decision for you, then looking at this analytics will make your decision making skills and decision taking skills a little bit easier, and it'll be more validable as well, guys. And it'll be more validated as well, guys. And the second thing is to will require new revenue, right? So let's say you have the data which pretty much only a couple of people can make sense of understand. Let's say your market is very niche. In that case, sure, you'll be still making revenue, still be making money on it. But then at the end of the day, if you have to reach out to a broader audience, you need to make sure your data is understood by this broader audience, right? So that forms the second very important need for data analytics, guys. And the third one is to obviously decrease these operation costs for every organization. So this can be a very demanding task if you have to convert raw data into information, process the data, and make out very good visualizations out of it as well. But then if you have the workforce for it, then sure, you can do it. But if not, again, since it's probably a manual task, and until a couple of years ago, it surely was a manual task. And these days you can implement machine learning and data analytics to pretty much automate itself and make your job easier as well. It speeds up your work. It keeps you very efficient in such a way where your data is being visualized, processed very effectively. So again, time is money when it comes to big organizations, right? So on that note, pretty much it helps decrease all of the operational costs with respect to, either waiting in the data pipeline, or waiting to process, waiting to publish, waiting to do some analytics, waiting for visualization. All of these waits, you need not consider them anymore, because they will pretty much be reduced to null, guys. So on that note, you might be wondering, who are data analysts, right? So data analysts are the people who sit at the end of the chain. I'll just explain the chain in the next slide. So these guys form a very good workforce for the company, where they basically deliver the values by taking in all the data that data scientist might give it to them, a data engineer might give it to them, and then he uses this person, data analyst, uses all of these to answer a couple of questions and then communicate all of the results back. And all these results that he just gives back is basically used to take very good business decisions, guys. It might include analytics of past trends, it may be prediction of what the future looks like, and so much more. And then the common tasks done by data analysts are data cleaning, performing analytics, and then creating visualizations. Well, data cleaning to come about it is basically simple, guys. So again, data is raw information, right? To make sense out of it, to pick out information that we only require, and to make sure that, again, efficiency is the game here. If you're pretty much processing data that we pretty much will not require, then it's just a waste of time and resource. So cleaning the data, making sure that your data is just perfect enough for processing, that's a very important first step, guys. So this is the spearhead of a data analyst's role. And then the second one is, obviously, as soon as your data is clean, you need to perform some very good analytics on it and create very good visualizations, guys. So these 4 designations you see on the screen right now is basically the designations a data analyst is also known by. So the first is a business analyst. So data analyst is also a business analyst. He or she can be an operations analyst, a business intelligence analyst, and a database analyst as well, guys. So coming to the tasks that they pretty much do, the first important task that we already spoke about was cleaning and organizing raw unstructured data, right? So this is again a very overlooked concept in today's world. Unless you get your hands dirty with the data itself, when you start to go about doing that, you will realize that cleaning and organizing the raw data is extremely important, because at the end of it, your data might be unstructured, your data might be semi-structured, or it might be a structured data. This will not matter if the data you're processing is of no use at the end, guys. So cleaning and organizing raw data is very important. And then the second thing is the analysis of all of the hidden trends found in the data. So making sense of something, again, maybe predictions in the future, or looking at past trends, generating this sort of an information which you cannot figure out upfront just by looking at the data. This is pretty much the umbrella under which the hidden trends function of a data analyst's work. So you'll be looking at a data, you'll find something very interesting. So let's say you find a trend in your data where pretty much you can access a new side of the market with respect to your sales in the next 5 years, 10 years. And then you were not told this, but then your data was telling you this. So you making sense of the data in which this trend was found, which was not upfront, then this is again a very important skill of a data analyst as well, guys. And the third important thing is pretty much the big picture view using descriptive statistics. At the end of it, sure, we know what the past trends of the company are, we know how the company is going on now, but then if you need to just summarize all of this and say even add some predictions for the next 5-10 years, getting this big picture view of what's happened, what's happening now, and what will happen in the future, not just using very simple statistics, but using descriptive statistics, where we'll be picking up each aspect of what's going on and then perform analytics on it and find out what's going on. If we are right at this place, if we are wrong at this place, how can this be improved? How can this concept be checked? How can we reach the clients better, and so much more. So getting this big picture view is again a very important task a data analyst goes about doing, guys. And the fourth one is probably the most important thing a data analyst does, is pretty much the creation of dashboards and visualizations, guys. So as I already told you in the introduction part of the video, where we're starting out with raw information, again a lot of numbers, but if you have to show these numbers at a business meeting, numbers are numbers, some people like them, but a majority of the people who they might not understand the numbers. So making these numbers as your input, creating very good visualizations, giving them a user interface, and giving your customers, your peers, your superiors, your business meeting members, giving them a very good user experience with all of this data, again at the end of it will add up to very good business methodologies, and then it will help you take better business driven decisions again. And again, the same goes for presentations of results to your clients and your internals as well, guys. So coming to the chain of how the data moves around in a firm, I have 3 important things that I just want to walk you through, guys, in a quick gist. So the first person who is the spearhead of the data for an organization. By spearhead, I mean he's the first one who look at the data, or he'll be responsible for bringing in all of the data from various sources, guys. So data coming in from the various sources, right? So think about all the data you can get from Twitter, or if you're performing any sentiment analysis, think of all the data that can come from all of the big data sources. You can have data coming from your various nodes from Hadoop, so much more. You can have your data coming from your own network, away from your network, and so much more, guys. So the data engineer is a spearhead who handles bringing in the data and making it understandable by the organization, guys. And then as soon as the data engineer finishes his part with the data moves on to the data scientist. The data scientist, he's responsible for working on all of these raw data, converting it into valid information. But then we already told this for the data analyst as well. Well, the data scientist pretty much uses machine learning algorithms. He uses deep learning. He uses, let's say, binary classifications, naive bias. He makes use of so many concepts here that a data analyst might not know. And he uses a lot of machine learning and deep learning, as I've already mentioned, to convert this raw data into valid information. And 99% of the time, the information which is being converted into are numbers, guys. So after the data scientist pretty much goes about doing his magic onto the data, and then we have the data analyst who steps in. This person, again, as we've already been mentioning, he is responsible for the prediction of what happens in the future, that is finding out trends, and then the presentation of all these informations to your peers, to your clients, to your superiors, and so much more. This is the basic gist of how data moves around. So the data is first seen by the data engineer. He does his job, comes to the data scientist. The data scientist works his magic via all these fancy algorithms and whatnot, and then pushes the data to the data analyst. The data analyst performs predictions, sees trends, visualizes the data, makes it presentable for everyone to understand, and then eventually goes about analyzing the data, guys. So on that note, we can come check out the type of data analytics that can be done in today's business, guys. There are a couple of types of data analytics, and I'll be walking you through the same. So the first type of data analytics you can go about doing is the descriptive analytics. With respect to descriptive analytics, again, the quick one phrase answer to what descriptive analytics is basically picking out data from a source, summarizing your data, making sure your data can be understood by everyone, that is picking out very good insights from your data, from all the past events, doing some predictive analytics on that as well, and then keeping it ready so your data is descriptive at the end of the day. And a question which goes by to understand the descriptive analytics is what happened in my business. So the answer to this question, what happened in my business, is given to by the descriptive analytics, guys. So most of the time the data which is generated by descriptive analytics is very comprehensive, it is extremely accurate, and the visualizations are very effective as well. So here's a very simple scenario that you guys can consider. So consider a scenario where an e-learning website decides to focus on a trending course according to the analytics of the search volume of the course content, which pretty much the users go on searching, and all of the revenue generated by the course in the past few months as well. So there are certain technologies, again, we live in a world full of trends, right? So let's say data science is in the boom right now. So pretty much any e-learning company, or any company for that matter, they're going to find these trends. They're going to know that, hey, data science is sitting in the top tier and we need to do something about it. If they have students in data science, then most of these companies are aimed at making the students' life better, right? So even as a firm here in IntelliPath, that's exactly what we do as well. We get this amazing insight from all of our learners for any particular course, and we use all of those insights, all of the feedback that we get, and what's trending in the market, what's latest in the market, and we use all of these to perform analytics, and then pretty much all of these helps us to put out a better course as well, guys. So at the end of it, you can already see how the descriptive analysis is already helping our business, right? And then the next type of data analytics we can check out is the diagnostic analytics, guys. So we already checked out what is happening to my business with respect to descriptive analytics. With respect to diagnostic analytics, you will check out of why this particular thing is happening to my business, guys. To simplify it, again, it basically gives you the ability to drill down to the root cause of why something is behaving just like how it should, guys. So drilling down the data to identify certain set of problems which are present in your data or in the trends that the data shows is a very vital part of diagnostic analytics, guys. And then it basically helps in answering the question for us about why the issue has occurred, So it just takes one look towards the data, towards the analytic result of the data to understand what the cause behind a problem, if one should exist, as guys. So again, to give you a very simple scenario of how diagnostic analytics would work, let's say consider a company where the sales went down for a month. So let's say they weren't doing as good as the previous months. So to diagnose this particular problem, you will let's say consider the situation where the number of employees were quitting their job and they weren't bringing in a lot of sales. So this could pretty much, this number of people quitting the company could directly impact the sales that they brought into the company. So the sales went down this month because they did not have the company right. They did not have the sales right. So finding out why this is happening and hunting for that root cause, which is basically a treasure hunt with your data, where you go on finding something and taking insights from your data. Finding out that why part of it is extremely important, where you'll be finding out what's happening to the data and why it's behaving this way, guys. So this again is a very vital part of diagnostic analytics. And coming to the third type of data analytics, it is predictive data analytics, guys. And as the name suggests, the quick question you'll be asking is what will happen in the future based on the past trends, guys. So hunting out historical patterns that are being used to basically predict all these specific outcomes using let's say machine learning algorithms, using deep learning, and using so many more concepts to predict something in the future based on the data we have now is again a very important niche of data analytics, guys. So predicting the future trends and the possibilities in the market based on the current trends, self-explanatory. And then it helps in optimizing all of the business plans for the future, because now your business has a direction to head to, right? So you're predicting certain aspects in the future and you know which path leads to better business strategies, right? And this will give you an edge over all of the other businesses as well. To give you a very nice example, think of the Netflix recommendation systems, guys. So this will basically use statistical modeling to analyze all the content that it's being watched by the audience across the world. So let's say there are a couple of TV shows which are very famous in India, but then there might be a couple of TV shows which is trending in the United States and let's say Australia, United Kingdom, so much more. Making sure that the right users in the right geographical area get to know the right recommendations are extremely important for Netflix as a business, right? So this again, predictive analytics will just do them good there, guys. Again, it will provide us with the prediction of all of the upcoming content and the shows that must be watched by all the different class of audience as well. So let's say someone sitting in the United States is very interested in watching an Indian trending television series as well. So knowing Netflix, finding out that this person exists and to recommend an Indian TV show for this person sitting in the United States to watch. Again, this is another very good business opportunity for Netflix. And then if they go about nailing their recommendation system for everyone, it just makes them a better business model, and then it just makes a better user environment for the users to go about watching videos there, guys. So the next type of data analytics is prescriptive data analytics. So as soon as we think of a prescription, again, we think of a doctor, we think of something, a medical appointment or something, right? Here it's again something similar. The question which will be asked here is what should be done? So applying advanced analytical algorithms to ensure that you make very good recommendations, you make sure you're punching out very good strategies that help the business, and so much more is a very vital part of prescriptive analytics, guys. So it basically involves breaking down all of this complex information into a very simple set of steps. And these steps are like the prescription we handed out when we visit the doctor, right? And these are the prescriptions which are precautious as well, let's say. They're the precautions basically used to remove any of the future problems that might occur, and it will also help in performing predictive analysis. This will basically help to predict outcome, and eventually that will help us optimizing business as well, guys. So this again demands the use of artificial intelligence and big data, and then the data analyst person will always be in touch with the data engineer as well and the data scientist as well, because he's going to need all the help he can get with respect to artificial intelligence from the data scientist and help with respect to big data from the data engineer as well, right? So all these three guys working in correlation make up a business, and I've already told you that. So again, to give you a common scenario of how this would happen, consider the prescriptive data analytics that Google Map goes about doing, right? So every day we are commuting from our office to our homes, or let's say we're going on a vacation and then we need to get out of the city as quick as possible. So Google Maps has a wonderful API where they map out the best possible route considering live traffic conditions, weather conditions, road closures, and so much more. It considers your distance, traffic constraints, and again, as I already told you, it even considers if it's raining, if you're walking, what's the best route that you can take to walk, what's the best route to take if you're on a car. And now they've come up with the bike route as well. So if you're in a moped or a bike, you can take a different route compared to the person who'd commute with the car, and so much more. So knowing this kind of a prediction into the future and giving you the sort of a prescription to ensure you don't run into any problems along the way is a very important part of prescriptive data analytics, guys. So on that note, let's quickly check out what the life cycle of data analytics is like. So the data analytics lifestyle, it basically defines the analytics process and all of the best practices which goes on from the discovery of the data or the project till the completion of this project, guys. So there are a couple of steps involved in this life cycle process, and the first one is business understanding. At the end of it, again, understanding the purpose and all of the requirements that come from your business and understanding it from the business viewpoint is very important and vital for the functioning of a business, right? This also consists of a very good introductory plan. It consists of a decision plan. It consists of a formal to-do list, let's say, for the business to go on to achieving the target. So the first important thing about the life cycle is the understanding of what's going on around you, and the second one is the data understanding, guys. With respect to data understanding, again, this mainly involves the process where we're collecting the data and we are processing the data in a way which leads to analytics. And then after the analysis of the data is done, we need to pick up some insights that we can go about using from the data. So extracting all of these meaningful insights from the data, again, is a very vital step in the life cycle of data analytics through data understanding, guys. The third part of it is data preparation. So data preparation is the let's say converting the data from an unstructured form to a structured form, and this involves constructing, let's say, a data set as well, and then this data set will be provided and fed into a model, and then this model will be used by a machine learning algorithm to train, to understand, to see what's going on, to perform predictions, and then it will be given to the data analyst to be visualized using Tableau or any other business intelligence tools, and so much more. So data preparation, again, is a very important phase where the data is actually being transformed, and even at the stage the cleansing of the data is pretty much performed as well, guys. And then comes modeling. This step is very important because it involves the selection of various modeling techniques, applying all of these modeling techniques, making sure the parameters are right and all of the readings here are right to ensure that your data being converted into the information, raw data being converted into the information is of the optimal, let's say, it's of the